mental health just isn't a thing. That's it isn't talked about at all. You're basically used until you burn out.
Welcome to the Silent Epidemic by Omnia Health Group, the podcast where we uncover the unspoken truths of mental health. There's a mental health crisis sweeping the nation, and we're here to discuss the aspects that often go unnoticed. I'm Hatice Mehmet-Quirk, a therapist, and each month I'll be speaking with leaders from various industries and disciplines. We'll explore how they tackle mental health both personally and professionally, offering valuable insights and advice. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Nathan Slater. Nathan is the Managing Director of Blue Mountain Media, a media company based in Essex. He is a content wizard who has also had an amazing career in higher education, teaching students various disciplines in the creative arts, including music and sound production. Hello, Nathan.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me. It's good to have you on the show.
You're very welcome. Happy to be here.
So the first question I have is, you've had a varied career in teaching, in creativity, in content production. Can you tell us how you got to this point and your own experiences with mental health in your journey?
I started off doing music. That's my biggest passion. At university, I studied music technology, and that kind of made me fall into the events industry. And from there, I've learnt lots of transferable skills in other creative sectors, which has kind of brought me to where I am today, with a stopgap in education in the middle. But it's all been creative things, because it tends to be if you're a creative person, you can kind of if you can do music, you can there's transferable skills to film and media and content and all those kind of things that I do now. With regards to mental health along that journey, I'm gonna break that question down into a couple of sections, because my experiences in my different roles have been very different. With regards to creativity, probably one of my earliest experiences with like mental health at like a really big degree is when I was at school. My best friend, her brother, who I was quite close to, a gentleman called Chris Hardman, stage name Little Chris, we had a TV show come to our school. It's Rock School with Gene Simmons, and he became quite famous off the back of that TV show. Was given a record deal, had an album, was given his own television show on T4, interviewing other famous people. So he had a really kind of meteoric rush to stardom. But as with young people who are in that kind of industry, there's massive highs and there's massive lows. It's all well and good when you're riding the wave of your fame, but it's not necessarily sustainable for everybody, and there are going to be peaks and troughs. So after a while, it kind of tailed off for him. He moved back home, but then was given another opportunity. He'd toured with Busted when he was touring his album, and one of the guys from Busted had written a musical. And he became one of the main characters in the musical, so he's back in the limelight again. But again, it's a massive difference from being on a stage touring with Busted to then being back at home living with mum and dad, to then being on the stage in the West End. And that musical did quite well, but was a relatively short run, so that then ended and he was back home again. And all the way through this, he kind of suffered with bouts of anxiety and depression, which I think personally was heightened a lot by the industry that he was in. And I don't think the creative industry is particularly good at protecting its young artists. It's moved on, but you're definitely still kind of used for your talent and used as a way to make money, and then not necessarily kind of nurtured and looked after and forward planning for those times when you're not going to be in the limelight. He and me and his sister have talked about this before, that we think he probably would have still had trouble with depression and anxiety even if he hadn't have become famous. It was within him from when he was a young child anyway. But I don't think that kind of that fame and wanting to kind of keep at that high level would have been particularly beneficial. And unfortunately, Chris, he'd come back home, but was in a good place, was living with a friend and had a job in our local area, not in the creative industries, but was earning money and was attending some therapy, but still, even with all those things going on, and he's always had the support of a really good nuclear family, his mum, dad, younger brother, older sister, so it's not like he was ever on his own, but he took his own life. And I think that, a lot of that is to do, it happens a lot with the young men, but I think it's a massive kind of extra added thing where you've had those highs and then those lows, and thinking like self-worth and those kind of things, like, is what I'm doing now worth doing? Obviously, I can only comment from the outside in. I've never been inside Chris's head, so you never really know what someone's thinking. But I think in the creative industries, there certainly can be some more done to support people who are definitely in the industry from a young age. Some people cope with it really well, but you do see, hear stories time and again of people who are famous young and then haven't had a particularly good adult life.
Yeah, we've got plenty of examples from the music industry, haven't we, of young stars that do struggle. And I mean, as a therapist, I'll scream that everyone should have therapy, but I do think it is really important that, if you're taking on these young stars, support their mental health, support their journey, manage their expectations, rather than using them as this money-making machine that has to attend this many shows, produce this many albums, etc., because it's all just pressure. And as you say, that's going to have a knock-on effect on someone's self-worth, their self-esteem. And then what happens when it tails off, if it doesn't continue for them, then what happens?
I think as well, obviously we're in a slightly different time now, that if some of the things that were available now were available then, that maybe might have helped him. Because he did have therapy when he was back at home, but that was your more traditional therapy where he was going to see a therapist. If, online therapy, such as Omnia therapy, had been available to him when he was on tour and traveling here, there and everywhere, that's obviously something that can be picked up in any place. If you're on tour for a long time, you can't get back to your therapist, can you? Whereas if you can do a video call, maybe that might have been something that would have helped him to talk through things. As to say, it's a very difficult one. We obviously think he's in a better place now, and that he's at rest, and his sister and his family, have got a good outlook on it. That he was a star that shone brightly while he was here. But I think maybe there may have been some of that stigma still from himself of not asking for enough help. Maybe being a bit proud, because he never come and spoke to me. He did speak to other friends and family, but I still maybe think there might have been a hangover of it maybe being a bit of a. He was very, very good at hiding it, as with a lot of famous people. When you saw him, he was always the life and soul of the party, and very jokey. But that obviously isn't what was happening in his head when he was on his own.
Yeah, it was masking what was going on for him in a big way.
My secondary job was in the events sector. I was doing corporate events. Mental health just isn't a thing. That's it isn't talked about at all. You're basically used until you burn out. You could go on the internet now and type in events manager or audio technician within London, and there'll be hundreds of jobs, because it's such a high turnaround, because you're working crazy hours. Sometimes you might not even see the light of day because you're in a conference room and you go in there when it's dark, you leave when it's dark. And it's rinse and repeat. It's all very high pressure because they're big clients that are spending a lot of money. Everything has to be right first time. There's no margin for error. Like, I worked in that industry for 4 years, maybe. And I was still pretty young. So I was only maybe like 22, 23 when I'd worked my way up to an event technology manager at quite a big 5-star hotel in the city. But I couldn't see myself doing that job forever. And that's when I made the sidestep into education. Okay. But yeah, those jobs are just, and there's plenty of jobs out there that are like it, where the kind of mentality is that's how it is, mate. Yeah. That's just the job. You work those are the hours. It's events. That's one of those things that are said, it's events industry. Break, what's a break? Like, you keep going until it's done.
Because as you said, there's so many jobs available. It's so fast paced. there's no room to even consider the impact that it's having on the individual that's filling those long hours, that's not taking breaks, that's or effectively working towards burnout. Because, well, if you don't do it, there's someone else that will do it for you. So the attitude is just get on with it.
Yeah, it's very disposable because, there's always a younger generation coming through from university who are interested in sound, video, lighting. Obviously, people who work up into management positions are there for longer. You do have some people who kind of stick it out. But there's no work-life balance with that type of job whatsoever. I did it before I was married and didn't have any other kind of responsibilities. I definitely couldn't do it now because, on a Friday afternoon, you could get an event booked in that's then all day Saturday and Sunday. So your plans for the weekend have gone out the window. Events still happen over Christmas, over the holidays, things like that. So you could never plan to have any downtime. You would just kind of have to squeeze your downtime in as and when it came, which is not really a sustainable way to work. Yeah.
And then you sort of said there that you didn't have, you weren't married at the time, you didn't have responsibility as such. So it was easier for you to meld into that lifestyle.
Live to work, basically.
But I wonder, what was it like for you personally being in that environment? Because it sounds lonely, it sounds stressful, there's not, as you said, the downtime, you don't know when you're going to get it, when am I going to cop a break here? How did that feel to go through that?
It's one of those things that sounds good on paper. So when you see your friends and what are you up to now? I've done an event for this massive company recently, or I did an event for this famous person, and everyone's like, oh, that sounds really, and really interesting, and I do the sound and the vision and the lighting. But in reality, it can be pretty lonely because you're not having time to make with your friends. You're getting up at the crack of dawn. So it can feel very secluded. I was lucky in the fact that when I moved to London and started that job, I moved in with one of my best friends. So even in the little bits of time that could be stolen, he was there. So if I'd have been living in a shared flat with strangers, which is what I was originally going to do until he offered me, to come stay with him until I got myself sorted. And I ended up living with him the whole time I lived in London. That really kind of saved me because he was still there. But if I'd have been, I probably would have been, felt even worse. Obviously, you make camaraderie within the job itself.
Yeah.
So the people who you're working with are in the same boat. You're all stressed together. But I definitely felt that it aged me very quickly. I was still very young at the time, and I had to have develop a very old head very quickly. And I made the decision to sidestep into education, and I took a really big pay cut because I couldn't see the longevity in that job. I definitely see myself having a heart attack, in my middle years because the pressure and stuff, and being someone who really wants things to be at the best possible level and always succeed and be a really high kind of level. That adds your own inbuilt pressures on things. So it's not just the pressure of the job, the pressure you put on yourself. It could be quite a lonely job at times.
And it sounds like you were fortunate in your living circumstances because you were able to connect with a friend, the moments that you were at home rather than the other option which you were previously considering, which could have been quite even more lonely and isolating. But it also sounds like the opportunity, because as you said, sounds good on paper to do fulfill these roles and pop them on your CV. That sounds like it was a real driver for you to roll your sleeves up and get on with it, even though you were aware that you wouldn't be able to do that really in the long run, but you needed to use that as a stepping stone almost in your career.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, very difficult at the time, but it's been very beneficial in my life, kind of going forwards. And I am, again, like I said earlier, someone who tends to not say no to things. I'll be like, well, I'll give it a go and see where this leads me. And the skills that I learned while working in that position are skills that I then took along with what I'd learned at university into education. And that's when I then started teaching first in the music sector, and then progressing into more mixed multimedia, graphics, photography, film production, those kind of things, esports, and that's kind of what's led me to what I'm doing today. But again, the education sector, completely different again, and that comes with its own mental health things around it. As a teacher, and as a teacher in charge of lots of young people. So as a teacher, again, it's a stressful position because you feel very responsible for the students who are under your care. So it's a different type of stress now. Rather than feeling stressed to have to deliver an event and make money for the client, you're wanting to make sure that you give everything you can to those students are your client, and you want those students to do as good as they can. So you'll if the students come in and they're not having a particularly good day, you'll take some of those pressures on yourself and you'll take those home with you. And especially I was doing 16 to 18-year-old students and some higher education, so some degree students as well.
Right.
So that's a really transformative time in the life of a young adult. So trying to get a qualification which is going to really impact what they end up doing as a job or where they end up going. But at the same time, first love, learning to drive, starting to drink, starting to go out, some of them starting to learn to live on their own. There's a whole manner of problems that can come in.
So did you almost feel responsible for the mental health and welfare of these children at the same time?
Definitely. And that's where the job of a teacher almost becomes impossible, because the job you're paid for is to impart knowledge on a certain subject area. But at the same time, you're kind of, for some students, you might be the only kind of parental role model figure in their life. Obviously, most of them have, mum and dad at home or live with, a family member. But, I had some students that didn't, some students that were in care. And you kind of really feel like you need to help every student, and there isn't the time to look after all of their mental needs and their kind of home needs, as well as imparting the knowledge that they need. One of the colleges I worked at had quite a good thing that they brought in towards the end of me being there, which were progress coaches. So progress coaches looked after the pastoral care of the students, while the teachers were more freed up to just do the educating side of things. So they would have time with them each week where they could check in with them and signpost them to anything that they needed. But yeah, there's a lot of difficulty as an educator trying to find that balance. You want to do as much as you can for all of your students, and it's very difficult, along with all the added pressures of Ofsted and marking and all those kind of things, and planning and all those kind of stuff. It's a really kind of difficult role, and that's the reason why I didn't feel like I could give everything that it needed. So that's why I took a step away from education and have now kind of gone back into the business sector and using the skills that I have learned.
I wonder, what training were you given to support the mental health side of the students' needs?
Not really anything. That's the thing as well. So there's different routes to becoming a teacher. I took the route, I did a postgraduate certificate in education. So I have my degree in music technology. I did a 1 year's course that gives you your teacher qualification. It's all very academic. It's a lot of looking at theorists. You don't really get taught classroom management. You don't really get taught any kind of coping strategies with that kind of thing. You have a mentor who is a teacher who has been a teacher for a while, so you can have conversations with them and learn from them. But you're not really given, unless they've got tools that they can give you, like this works for me, you can try this. You're not really given anything, especially with, specifics into mental health. The general kind of consensus, if a student approaches you with an issue, listen, note it down, and then refer them to the safeguarding team or someone who has got more specific training. So there are people within organisations that are better equipped to deal with it. But generally, the student's going to come to you because you're the person that they trust and that they have that bond with. And a lot of the time, you have to say to them, "I can't keep anything secret. Like if you give me some information and I think that you need support or you might be a danger to yourself or to others or someone is a danger to you, I'm going to have to pass that information on to the safeguarding team. You can't keep it between the two of you because that's what the rules are as a teacher." So then they might then not open up to you. Yeah, but you have to kind of be very transparent at the beginning.
Which I suppose is really frustrating. It's a bit sad because, as you said earlier, as an educator, you can have a massive impact on a child's welfare and their sort of path, where they're going to go and how they're going to end up. But yet you've been given no tools to spot or manage the signs and symptoms of poor mental health in a way that you can help that child. You almost sounds like you can refer on and there's people within the school that can help, but you yourself weren't equipped with those tools because it's just not involved in the training process.
I think that some like institutions are better at it than others, and like they'll bring in specialists to speak to you on staff development days. But so they're trying, and obviously it's become even more prevalent since lockdown. There's a lot more stress and anxiety and depression as a hangover from that, and kind of and social media in the way that students interact now in a very different way because of the time that they're growing up in. But yeah, it's not a part of the curriculum, and I really think that's where it's lacking.
Yeah.
Like that should be a really large part of your teacher training, is how to manage a classroom and how to manage young people, not just what they're learning, but in general.
In your opinion, what role does creativity play in maintaining good mental health, especially for young people in this fast-paced world?
It's a massively beneficial thing. It always has. Having a creative outlet where you can express yourself, whether that be music or dance or drama, or it doesn't have to be something as straightforward as that. It could be like, you can be creative in cooking. You can be creative in the way that you organise something. I think that it's massively beneficial to a whole range of students. Not everyone is academic. Not everyone enjoys the kind of core subjects at school. So your music, your dance, your drama, your art, those things are the way to kind of express yourself and have a creative outlet, to get your thoughts and feelings out and somewhere tangible. But the kind of the flip side to that is that I feel that, especially within education, those are the first subjects to get cut or have funding withdrawn or kind of pulled back. So I'm finding that when I was in education, there's less and less students coming through with a passion for it, because it's either seen as, why are you studying this because there's not a job at the end of it? You don't need to study something just because there's a job at the end of it. There's transferable skills in anything. My degree was in music, and I now work doing content creation. They're very far apart, but they're connected at the same time. And at the same time, they're not necessarily core subjects at schools anymore. So it was the case when I left. I'm not sure if it's still the case now, but high schools didn't have to have a music, drama, dance, art provision. They have to provide maths and English and science in the core. But if they didn't have a music teacher, they didn't have to provide any music. So that means that you've got thousands of kids that aren't learning at like a young age, so they're not developing those grassroots skills. They're not developing a passion, which means they don't have that artistic kind of creative outlet to be able to express themselves. And also you're robbing the world of the next kind of big musician or big actor or dancer, because they've not got the access to it from a young age. And I think that's really sad. And all the studies show that people who study creative subjects alongside academic subjects do better, because the creativity helps you with the other things. And also for kids that struggle in mainstream education, like I was okay at school, but I didn't particularly like maths or science. But I knew that like music would be at the end of the day, and that I had drama tomorrow. So I'd go to school because I'd be waiting for the subjects that I enjoyed.
Yeah.
If you're going to school and you've only got those subjects that you're not good at and you don't enjoy, you're not going to be going in as much as you should be.
And that's going to knock your self-esteem and your self-worth, because you're going to constantly feel as though you're not good enough or you're not achieving, especially where the area that you do have a bit of a passion for, a love for, isn't available.
and you'll find that the other places that do offer it are becoming smaller in number because they're not getting funding either. So if you didn't have it at school, there used to be lots of places where you could go and experience these things, and they're few and far between now. Like when I was at school, I got given an instrument for free, and lessons once a week, every week from the age of being 12 all the way through to when I was in sixth form. I continued doing it, which would have cost lots of money, which I wouldn't have been able to afford myself. My parents wouldn't have been able to afford. And there's not necessarily those services like available now. I'm not saying everyone has to go out and learn an instrument, but I definitely think that there's a lack of creative outlets for youngest. Don't get me wrong. There's lots of really good things out there that are doing a really great job, but I think that it should be more kind of looked at within a school environment so that you nurture that creative. Not necessarily saying that they should all end up doing music at a higher level and that they should get jobs in music, but by having that creative outlet, it's going to benefit your mental health. And it's also going to help you be creative in those other subjects. And like, you can be creative in any job, but if you've not been taught how to be creative, how to express yourself, how to get those things out there, then you're gonna struggle, not just being robotic and going through the motions and doing things in a very linear way. The best business people are creatives because they think of things in really different ways to everybody else. We need to nurture that creativity.
In your experience, how can parents and educators better support young adults who are pursuing creative careers and struggling with mental health?
I think it's just being more open to it. I was very lucky that like my parents have always allowed me to express myself and supported me in whatever I thought was something interested in. But you do get a lot of parents who are like, well, there's no job at the end of this. I found a lot of this when I was a teacher as well, on open days where parents were coming in with their children and their children were saying, this is the course I'd like to do. And I'm having to do the job of convincing mum and dad as to why this might be a beneficial course for their son or daughter. They've already shown an interest in that that's what they want to do. So me having to say, well, there are transferable skills, like, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to end up working in this one role. There's this role, there's that role, there's the other. So I think from parents just being more open to like creative jobs can lead to a lot more than just a creative job. And that the skills are very transferable. And with regards to mental health, like supporting your child in, attending a drama club or buying a cheap instrument from a second-hand shop if they show an interest. Just those little things can really make a difference, like to that child growing up and in later life. I think social media has an impact as well. Like everyone now is kind of like looking for that end goal, and it's seen as, if I'm doing something just for the joy of doing something, that's a waste of time. Like any bit of free time, I should be coming up with a business idea, or I should have a side hustle, basically. So like if music isn't my side hustle, if I'm not making music by like playing gigs at the weekend, why am I wasting my time playing music? Not everything has to have a definitive purpose. So I think parents kind of, should allow like some things that your child does, just let them do for the sake of doing them.
Yeah, because there are so many benefits to creative expression. I mean, especially within the therapeutic world, it's become quite common now to use different creative techniques to allow people to express themselves. And the biggest thing I find is a lot of the creative tools allow for that mindfulness, allows for that space for a person to get, a bit of a break from what's going on inside their mind. And then they can have those moments of clarity in terms of, okay, now I know I need to deal with this, or now I can tackle that issue by doing this. By having that moment of creativity to just express themselves without the pressure of, I'm doing this because I'm going to achieve that, and I'm doing this because this is the end goal. Just as you said, doing it for the sake of doing it just gives them a break from the fast-paced world, the pressure, and actually teaches them that it's okay to do things just to enjoy yourself.
And it's something that it's good for your mental health with you not necessarily realising it, especially for a young adult. Like, the thought of therapy for some young adults is very scary, and obviously that's what we know we're trying to change, and let them know that therapy is something that's very normal and very easy to access, and can benefit everybody. But for the few that still don't want to take that leap just yet, like I as a youngster, if I was having an emotional time about something, I'd write a song about it. Yeah, and then that's the way of getting my emotions out on paper, and that's my relief. And that's something that if you went and saw a therapist, they might prescribe to you, and you might have done it without even knowing. So yeah, having those creative outlets to kind of release those emotions, but in a good way, in a positive way. Like, I've got a song at the end of it. I've got something tangible that I can then go, oh, this is obviously what was in my subconscious. Now I see it on paper, and maybe look at working through it.
Well, it's a form of journaling, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're getting all your thoughts out onto a piece of paper. How can media and content creation, areas you're deeply involved in at the moment within your role, raise awareness and support mental health initiatives for young adults?
Social media can be a really great way of getting information out there, and creating engaging content that people of various different ages and backgrounds and degrees, like it's such a we didn't have things like that when I was younger, so the information wasn't there. It's a really quick and easy way to get information out there. On the flip side of that, there is misinformation, and sometimes there is information that's kind of packaged in such a way as just to get views, as opposed to to actually communicating the knowledge that the young person or whoever you're trying to communicate with needs to get. So it has its pros and its cons. I think maybe we need to get better at policing it, like the social media companies themselves. Like, obviously they've started doing more and more, but that's just looking for certain buzzwords and things and stuff like that, like removing videos that might have a certain word in them, but no one's really sitting there and listening to the content and the if you package something in a positive way, that's not going to get taken down, but those positive pieces of information you're given might be entirely wrong, because you might not, be a professional like yourself, and your intentions might be the best, but the information you're given might be very, harmful to the person who then gets it at the end of it. So it has its pros and its cons, and I think as long as young people are pushed into the direction of making sure you're looking at a source that is, reliable and is getting its information, from studies and science and factually based, then I think, what we're doing and the information we're putting out there can be very beneficial.
But it's also best, I suppose, to bear in mind that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So one video that you may see may really work and sort of have helped a friend of yours, but won't necessarily help you out in the same way, because you're completely different, your needs are different. So I suppose there's an element of taking it with a pinch of salt, really.
Yeah, I suppose as long as you take everything, it should be the same as with the news, you kind of got to, like you say, take it with a pinch of salt. Like, I'll give this a go and see, but don't take it as everything that you see in social media, everything you read in the newspaper is true.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to come at it from a certain angle. But again, that's another one of the benefits, I suppose, is that if you find something that doesn't work from you, there's so much out there in social media that you can keep looking, and eventually, hopefully, you will find something that works from you from a different source.
Nathan, in your experience, how has social media impacted young people's mental health, both positively and negatively?
As an educator, I've seen a massive impact, and I think I started teaching kind of on the cusp of it, and I taught all the way through lockdown and out the other side of it. Good and bad. I think more bad currently than good. It's massively affected concentration levels. Like, I've seen a massive difference in people being able to be able to concentrate, because social media is so digestible and so short. Trying to hold the engagement of a class on a task becomes really difficult if you've got to teach them one thing that particular day, not 10 things in quick succession. So trying to actually give the information to the students has become very difficult. So it's made teaching difficult in that regard for concentration levels. And yes, the levels of anxiety and depression and stuff have skyrocketed. I think a lot of that is to do with students holding themselves to unattainable goals, both physically and mentally. Like, they see these beautiful people who have, it's all been filtered, it's all been shot in a nice way to make them look and make where they are look better than it is. But you're like, I need to look like that. And you get depressed if you don't look like that. Everyone's different. Not everyone's going to fit into, these kind of, Instagrammable looking things. And the same with like life as well. They're like, oh, this 16-year-old's already got £1 million business and owns a clothing line. I work at Asda. Like, that doesn't mean that you're like worth any less. It just means that your life is going to have a slightly different trajectory to them. But because all of that there is there and so easily seeable, I can see, it's knocked confidence a lot. On the positive side, obviously, there's communities there where people can speak to each other and learn from each other. An example was I taught esports for a while, and we would have the classes create their own Discord servers that were then moderated by one of the senior students. So you had the younger students being able to communicate with each other outside of lessons about work and bits and pieces, and that meant they created really like good little communities, and the older students would make sure to keep it in check and that nothing got too silly, and that was really beneficial. And some of those students were work from home students. We had students that were distance learners who couldn't get into the classroom, but they still felt part of the community because they're involved in those things. So it definitely has its benefits. But yeah, I think the negatives are still massively prevalent. I don't really know how we're going to police it. I think youngsters are on social media too much too early. I see that in my young nieces. And everyone is growing up a little bit too quickly, which means they're not developing, I feel like, at the rate they should be, and are not enjoying life as much at a younger age because they're already trying to be an older head. There's less time spent kind of being creative, using your own brain to make your own fun. Like, I would, in the summer, just go down the beach or like go down the park. We would make things like, we would come up with things to do because there wasn't any social. I didn't have an iPhone. I didn't have anything like that. And I think that's at the detriment to youth of today.
The thing that sprung to mind there when you said this rush to sort of almost grow up, the thing that sprung to my mind was it's like the children are forgetting to set their own foundations in that need to get to this grown-up state so quickly. And without that solid foundation, they're almost setting themselves up for a fall later on in life because they haven't got that foundation.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a real struggle with social media because it has it has benefits. There's lots of information out there which we never really talked about before, which has been a massive benefit for some students because they can see themselves in other people that they see online. Maybe I've got ADHD because I do some of those things, or maybe I've got depression because that sounds a bit like me, which then means they can be signposted and seek things out. But then, at the same time, you've got this negative impact of like being on it too much and depressing yourself because it happens to me as well. I'll see people on there from school or even people I don't know, and I'm like, oh, I wish I lived there or I was doing that, and then you start to like depress yourself because you shouldn't hold yourself to someone else's kind of level. You should hold yourself to your own level. If you're happy in what you're doing, then it doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. But it's really easy to slip into that kind of depressive state of like, oh, I haven't got what they've got. They've got a nicer car than me, or they live somewhere nicer, or they seem to be going on more holidays. Why aren't I going on more holidays? I've been on a holiday. I've still had a good time. But you start to hold yourself in like, and a lot of these people, are getting paid a lot of money to make their lives look like that. So it's just, educating our youngsters to kind of, again, take social media with a pinch of salt and maybe take a break from it a bit more often.
You've set me up quite nicely there because on each episode we try to pick a topic where we can share some advice and give some guidance for our listeners at home. And the topic that I chose today was the sins of social media. The first of the issues that comes about from social media is this constantly counting likes. And I think young people, and even you just pointed out, we can get sort of trapped into it as well. This fixation on, oh my God, I posted this picture and so got 120 likes and I only got 7. That can have a massive negative impact. It can suck a young person in, especially.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily, you could post a very similar picture on the same day as someone else and the algorithm might not pick you up. So it not necessarily means that no one likes your picture. It's like no one's seen it.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the course level, yeah, you're totally right. You're only valuing your worth in that kind of numerical value that you're getting against something, and it shouldn't come from. Yes, everyone likes external validation. It's nice to be told you look nice today, or what you're doing looks interesting, but value, it should come from within, and too much nowadays is put on from without. If you're happy in your own self and what you're doing, then you're going to have a lot more joy in your life than if you're always seeking external validation, because the audience is fickle. Something they might think looks nice one day, they might not be interested in the next day. So you're never going to always have those likes and everything that you're sending. Whereas if you're, share things just because you want to share it, not because you think other people are going to like it.
Yeah. Another issue is engaging in conflict. And I do think the young people of today really need to be taught this, especially in schools. These keyboard warriors, you see a comment, you don't like it. You could then, I've seen people arguing with someone on social media that they've never met. And all they've done is share an opinion that isn't in line with their opinion, but they could be writing back and forth to this person for hours or even days on end. But that's causing massive internal distress.
Yeah, like words hurt. And just because it's a faceless person that you're writing to doesn't mean there's not a real person at the end of it. So I think a lot of people, they use it as a really bad outlet for their aggression. They'll go online and they'll specifically comment on things and enter into an argument just because they want an argument, because that's their way of releasing their aggression. So those people need to be signposted to better ways of of dealing with that themselves. But people who are on the receiving end of it need to remember that, firstly, some of these people are doing it just to get a rise out of you. And they probably would never say these things to your face because they don't have the guts to say it to you. It's only when they're in the comfort of their own home that they'll say these really negative things. So I think comments is a really difficult thing because they can be helpful. Because they can say, oh, this content is really good. Have you thought of doing this? Oh no, I haven't thought of doing that. But on the whole, you look through the comments on YouTube and on Facebook. It's a lot easier to say something nasty than it is to say something nice. So let's just, spread a little bit of love and send some nice comments rather than some nasty comments. And it can have a massive impact, especially on young people, because they've not learnt that tolerance yet. Like if I posted a picture and my mate said, you look fat, I'd be like, oh yeah, well, cheers mate. I've learnt to deal with that thing. I know he doesn't really mean it. I know he said it as a joke or what have you. But as a young person, if someone says, you don't look the way you should look, you're going to take that to heart. So I think maybe we need to it's not going to go away. Social media is not going to go away. Commenting on YouTube videos and things like that, it's not going to go away. It's here to stay. It will evolve and it will change. So what we probably need to do now is within our citizenship classes, our PSHE classes. I'm not quite sure what the class is called now, but the lesson in school where traditionally you've learnt about life and sex and drugs and those kind of things. Social media kind of needs to come in there now as well, and how to deal with it and how you should conduct yourself when you're in that environment.
Yeah. So another issue with social media is ignoring the impact on your mood. I'll share something personal with you here. I noticed when the whole TikTok trend first started, and I'd get into bed at night and I'd start scrolling. And then I realised I weren't sleeping properly. Now you're thinking, oh, is it hot? What's on my mind? Am I unsettled? What's going on? And then when I delved into it, I realised it was that TikTok before bed. So I now have a rule where I do not go on any social media when I get into bed, just because I've noticed the impact on my mood. Now, I'm an adult and I've managed to navigate that. even though I sort of fell into the trap for a couple of weeks. Now, for a young person, that must be really difficult to manage.
Yeah, definitely. There's lots of studies that are happening and have been happening, that the brain chemistry in a young person's brain is obviously a quite tumultuous and moving around, crazy things happening at that particular time in their life. Anyway, if you then throw these highly stimulating videos into it just before sleep, you're kind of setting yourself up for disaster. Is it cortisone levels? Your cortisone levels are massively spiked when you're on social media, because you're getting these really, intense short videos, and that means that your brain is firing on all cylinders. And if you then go, right, bedtime now, your brain's going to carry on going, and you're not going to be able to sleep. I've fallen into the same pit, and I've done the same thing. I have timers set on my social medias within the app on my phone, so I can only go on Instagram or TikTok for half an hour a day, over the course of the whole day. And once that half an hour is done, the app locks. I can't get into it anymore. That might mean that I might scroll for half an hour before bed. Sometimes I still fall into that trap, but it means at least it's only half an hour. Because it's like on Friday nights or Saturday, where I didn't have work the next day, I'd fall into a trap and I'd be on TikTok for hours and hours, because I'd be like, oh, it's research for work. I need to know what the current trends are, and there's some interesting things in here that I can start to put into practice within my editing and my film work and stuff like that. So because there are engaging things on there, but yeah, you definitely need to make sure that you put those boundaries in place.
And I suppose that's a really good tip for parents of teenagers, because obviously it is difficult. How do you manage that level of allowing them sort of to do what everyone else is doing, but then not letting them get stuck into the trap of it eating up into their time, where it's impacting on their mood, they're comparing themselves to others, their self-worth's through the floor, they're stuck in this social media war during this difficult time anyway, because as you said, the teenage brain is going up and down and is wild and all over the place anyway. Installing those time limits on those apps may be a good happy medium between parent and teenager.
Yeah, I think so, because it means that, they're still getting access to it. It's not like they're not on it at all, and they can still post and things like that. But you're just managing the amount of time that's spent on it can make a massive difference. Especially, I think, bedtimes is a key one, because they're still doing studies on whether blue light actually affects your eyes and things and stuff like that. But I think it probably does. It's it's engaging, so you can't fall asleep in the same natural way that you do. What I tend to do is I'll go on social media maybe an hour or two before bed, and then I read an actual book before bed, because that, although still engaging, is engaging in a different way, and I find myself falling asleep, and that's when the book goes down, and then I'm in a nice deep sleep.
Really able to unwind.
But yeah, I think putting those minimal boundaries in place, because obviously teenagers are always going to have a bit of pushback. But I think if you can put some boundaries in place just to restrict the amount, that's going to be very beneficial for everybody.
So we end each show by asking each of our guests the same question. And the question is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
It's difficult. So, my mind immediately goes to telling me to not go out the day after I went on my Spanish trip when I was 15, because that day I got smacked in the face with a log when I was messing about in the woods with my mates and knocked my two front teeth out. But that would have a massive effect on my life going forward. I wouldn't necessarily have picked up a guitar. I was a trumpet player at the time. I couldn't play the trumpet without no two front teeth. So I started playing the guitar, and that led on to me being interested in music technology, which then led into me going to university and studying that, which has led on to everything that I've done. So if I was giving advice to my younger self, I wouldn't tell them to change anything, because I wouldn't want my life to be any different. It's been really, really good. What I maybe would say to my younger self is take even more advantage of the opportunities that you've got when you're younger. I was pretty good, compared to most of my friends. I would say yes to all weird and wonderful things. I was in every play, I was in every band, anything that was a little bit that's a bit different or a little bit nerdy. I don't know if it would be cool if I did that. I would just do it. but there were still some times, especially at university, where I had access to some really good resources, and I was, too busy out partying and things like that. So my advice would be, and I give the same advice to students when I'm teaching them, is like, this time when you're kind of like between the ages of 16 and 18, most of you are still living at home, so you've got the support of mum and dad financially. This is the time where you should be working for free. Like if you're interested in music, go and give some time to your local music school and help teach younger kids, or go and volunteer at a recording studio so you can get some access there. I think really kind of taking advantage of that time of your life, and grabbing any opportunity that's given to you. Don't just say no because you think you won't be good at something. That's another kind of key piece of advice that I give a lot to my students. Lots of them will say no just because they're nervous about things. Say yeah, if it goes wrong, what's the worst that's going to happen? Yeah. You won't get asked back, or you won't do it again, but at least you've given it a go, and it might lead on to something.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you for listening to The Silent Epidemic. A special thanks to our guest Nathan for sharing his valuable insights and experiences. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like, share and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. This is The Silent Epidemic, and we'll see you next time.